Hey everybody. Hope you can hear me. Hope you can hear me okay. All right. Badoom. Hey. Why would it work? Why would it work? Why would I be able to hear myself? That would make no sense. Whatever. Anyways, gonna do a quick check on the Faces books. Make sure this is coming through. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Not according to my phone right now. Anyways, just wanted to do a little live reading, which I haven't done in a while. I'm going to read some excerpts from American Sideshow by Marc Hartzman, as well as Nightmare Alley by Lindsay Gresham. That's Lindsay Gresham, not Lindsay Graham. This first entry is titled The Sacred Hairy Family of Burma, Mafun and Mung Foset, and I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly. The Sacred Hairy Family of Burma was both sacred and hairy for generations before ever being exhibited to a mass audience. In the late 1880s, the family belonged to King Thibaw of Burma, who believed that having them around would bring him good fortune. They were treated as mascots, showered with jewels, and shown to visitors only on important occasions. Thibaw had two members of the family residing at his court, Mafun and her son, Mung Foset. Both were covered in long, silky hair from head to foot, with locks sprouting from their cheeks, chins, foreheads, and corners of their eyes, and the insides of their ears. Again, for reference, that's how much hair they had. Thibaw had two members of his family, the auburn-colored tresses reached 14 inches on some portions of their bodies. Only the palms of their hands and the soles of their feet were spared from hair. The family's hypertrichosis ran through 5 generations. In the first 4, each hairy member married a normal spouse and had 7 children. In each case, there were 4 normal and 3 hairy offspring. Mung Foset's 6 siblings all died, leaving him the sole representative in his immediate family. With Thibaw's help, he attempted to pass his genes to a 6th generation by marrying a maid at the court. The young bride was not attracted to the woolly bachelor, but Thibaw promised her a snazzy silver-handled umbrella if she went through with the matrimony. Some of us should be so lucky in our own marriage arrangements and what we got out of them. The offer was too good to resist. Unfortunately for him, Mung Foset's materialistic new wife did not produce the traditional 7 children. In 1885, King Thibaw was overthrown by the British, and the liberated Sacred Hairy family was forced to give up the lavish palace lifestyle. Legend has it that a captain, Papirno, discovered them in the woods, where they lived much like beasts of the forest on what roots they could gather. Papirno fed and comforted them, all toward preparing them for exhibition. 2 years after they gained their freedom from Thibaw, P.T. Barnum secured the furry family for his Barnum and London Greatest Show on Earth production. Advertisements proclaimed that $100,000 was being paid for the privilege of exhibiting the attraction for 1 season. And we're talking about like 1880s dollars right there. And Barnum billed his latest prize as a new and most prodigious race of unearthly beings. These unearthly beings were accompanied by Mung Foset's clearly terrestrial wife and Mafun's normal nephew. Together they were an instant sensation at London's Egyptian Hall. The four simply sat on stage, smiling at admiring crowds. This new lifestyle was particularly easy for Mafun, who was now blind and thus endured the many wide-eyed stares with ease. Barnum's tour soon brought the family to the United States. In conjunction with showman Adam Forepaugh, he briefly exhibited them at New York's Madison Square Garden, beginning on March 14, 1887. The New York Times reported that the Siamese twins, the double-headed nightingale, the tattooed man, Tom Thumb, and Chang, all rolled into one, could not compare with them in point of attractiveness. The family's magnificent appearance had no encore. After Barnum's one-year contract, no further mention is made of any sacred, hairy exploits. Speaking of Tom Thumb, let's go to him. And the Thin Man, actually. So Isaac W. Sprague, the original Thin Man, 1841 to 1887. Look at that. That's what keto gets you. Isaac W. Sprague was born in East Bridgewater, Massachusetts, May 21st, 1841. According to his autobiographical pamphlet, aside from being an expert in the art of swimming, he was normal, an active child. At age 12, he began to lose weight rapidly. Someone believed he was swimming too much. Had Sprague discovered the key to weight loss? Doctors shot down the theory, but was stumped as to why the boy was withering away. His appetite seemingly remained healthy. As an adult, Sprague worked with his father, who ran a shoemaking business and later opened a grocery. But the more emaciated Sprague became, the weaker he grew. After his parents died, it became too difficult for him to continue working and earning a living. He gave up his job at the grocery and looked for a new line of work. In 1865, he found his answer on a visit to a sideshow passing through town. Upon seeing Sprague, the proprietor promptly offered him a job. He initially refused, but ultimately ended up accepting the position. It was time to capitalize on his looks by appearing as a living skeleton. Soon after, he became even more ambitious. Sprague went straight to P.T. Barnum in New York and showed off his thin frame. In a promotional booklet, he described the audition. Mr. Barnum stood very near me, and I overheard him say to his agent, "Pretty lean man, where did you scare him up?" The job was his at $80 a week, but his career with the master showman ended abruptly when the American Museum burned down for a second time in 1868. The skeletal Sprague managed to slip out and escape the flames. With Barnum busy, mired in the aftermath, it was time for the Thin Man to offer himself to someone else, namely a wife. Sprague married Miss Tamar Moore, and they had 3 healthy sons. His family gave him a renewed passion for life. Life that had at times seemed so little worth preserving now seemed more precious, he wrote. Sprague later resumed touring with Barnum's Circus and others. His weight might have varied over the years, but at age 44 and at a height of 5 foot 6 inches, he weighed a wispy 43 pounds. After numerous medical exams as an adult, physicians determined that Sprague suffered from an extreme case of progressive muscular atrophy. He was known to walk around with a can of milk to keep himself alive. Isaac Sprague's life ended in poverty. The living skeleton became a dead one on January 5th, 1887 in Chicago. I'm going to do a quick check on Facebook, see if this is coming through. Now that I've possibly wasted a bunch of time, if there's a glitch or audio problems. Come on now. Go on now. A-doop-a-doop-a-doo. So the next one we're going to talk about is Tom Thumb, 1838 to 1883. And for reference, here it says, Tom Thumb dressed as Napoleon circa 1845. The image was part of P.T. Barnum's family archives. Let's see if you can see that. There's one photo, and then there's the other one. There we go. That's him just as Napoleon. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Sorry. Running YouTube footage of freak shows and stuff from back in the day to accompany this, so nobody gets bored just staring at my sideburns. All right. So the other image was Tom Thumb in his miniature carriage pulled by Shetland ponies. Here we go. History's most famous little person was born Charles Sherwood Stratton on January 4th, 1838 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He weighed an impressive 9.5 pounds at birth, but stopped growing at 18 months. Let's see if I got it.
Joe Lorello, often billed as the human owl.
Oh, wait. What? Ah, fuck. Sorry, I had to mute the YouTube. By 1842, local showman P.T. Barnum had heard about the tiny child, having had recent success in showcasing the unusual. Barnum envisioned Charles as his next star. Sorry, messing with my stuff. Hoping this all is coming through. We'll see. If not, I will delete it. He met with the boy's parents and persuaded them to allow their son to be exhibited for $3 a week. He was 25 inches tall and weighed just 16 pounds. As his next star. Yep, something's working. Apparently. Hoping this. Good. Sorry, everybody. Still getting the hang of this. All right, back to Tom Thumb. He was 25 inches tall and weighed just 16 pounds. Barnum molded the boy into a singer, dancer, and all-around entertainer. Inspired by the thumb-sized knight of Arthurian legend, he gave him the name Tom Thumb. But instead of knighthood, Barnum's Tom Thumb gained the rank of general. General Tom Thumb's age was bumped up from 4 to 11 to convince audiences he was truly a dwarf and not just a very small toddler. Barnum's genius deceit worked, and Tom Thumb... There's no get left on that. And Tom Thumb was a sensation. The showman had created a true gentleman in miniature. His star was drinking wine at dinner by the age of 5 and smoking cigars by age 7. General Tom Thumb and Barnum set off to tour Britain and Europe in 1844. They began in London at the Princess Theatre. Barnum, the master of showmanship, had 4 Shetland ponies cart Thumb to performances in a tiny, custom-built carriage. After a few successful engagements about town, he was invited to appear before Queen Victoria at Buckingham Palace. The talented Stratton performed as Frederick the Great and Napoleon, and in Scottish costume and elegant court dress. Her Majesty, rather small herself, at just under 5 feet, was quite taken with the little general. He and Barnum were invited to perform again for the Queen and the Prince of Wales. Tom Thumb was in demand. Exhibitions at Egyptian Hall earned an amazing $500 a day. He even starred in a play written for him, Hop O' My Thumb. He and Barnum later graced France and Belgium with their presence before returning to London. With all the success, the boy Thumb had become quite the ladies' man and enjoyed numerous opportunities to kiss adoring women. In 1847, the showman and the general returned to America as millionaires. The two made each other famous. Tom Thumb took his earnings and purchased a mansion in his hometown. He and Barnum compounded their riches with tours around the United States, including a visit to President Polk. In 1849, Barnum and Thumb's father formed the Great Asiatic Caravan, Museum and Menagerie, which starred Thumb until his father's death in 1885. Thumb soon resumed touring, but without Barnum. Tom Thumb and Barnum remained close. When Barnum ran into financial difficulties, the general helped him by touring Europe again. During a visit to the American Museum in 1862, Tom Thumb met a new person inside Barnum's stable of oddities, a young lady named Lavinia Warren. Romance blossomed between the two Lilliputians, and an engagement was soon announced. Barnum made the union a true event, arranging for 2,000 wedding guests, including Commodore Nutt as best man and Minnie, Warren's sister, as bridesmaid. Charles Stratton and Lavinia Warren were married on February 10, 1863 at Grace Church in New York. Now Thumb had everything: fame, fortune, and a suitably sized sweetheart. The General and Mrs. Thumb were a popular attraction for years and earned a great deal. Along with their mansion, they owned a yacht and several horses. As the years passed, Thumb began to age quickly. His skin became wrinkled and yellowish, and he fattened up to 70 pounds. A newspaper reported that he looked like an orange that had been sat upon. He even grew, soaring to a full 3 feet 4 inches. Despite the changes, he continued performing. "People seem to have an idea I have retired, but the truth is I can't do without the excitement of public life," he said in 1884. A year later, Thumb and Warren joined their old friend Barnum in his new venture, the Barnum and London Circus. To add further interest to the act, Barnum exhibited them with their baby. Of course, the infant was not actually theirs. The real mother, a nurse, was never far away. Tom Thumb's illustrious career came to an end in 1883. On July 15, the general suffered a fatal stroke. More than 10,000 people attended his funeral. Thumb was only 45, but in those years he lived larger than most normal-sized men. He had seen the world, amassed a fortune, and perhaps kissed more women than any man alive. God, I hope this is working, you guys. I want to read one more entry, and then I want to jump into... Well, I don't know. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just save that one. Yeah, I'm going to save the Tochi brothers for another time. And I want to read the first chapter of Nightmare Alley. Card 1, The Fool. Make sure I'm... Yep. Stan Carlyle stood well back from the entrance of the canvas enclosure, under the blaze of a naked light bulb, and watched the geek. The geek was a thin man who wore a suit of long underwear, dyed chocolate brown. The wig was black and looked like a mop, and the brown grease paint on the emaciated face was streaked and smeared with the heat and rubbed off around the mouth. At present, the geek was leaning against the wall of the pen, while around him a few, pathetically few, snakes lay in loose coils, feeling the hot summer night and sullenly uneasy in the glare. One slim little king snake was actually trying to climb up the wall of the enclosure and was falling back. Stan liked snakes. The disgust he felt was for them, at their having to be penned up with such a specimen of a man. Outside, the talker was working up to his climax. Stan turned his neat blonde head toward the entrance. "Where did he come from? God only knows. He was found on an uninhabited island 500 miles off the coast of Florida. My friends, in this enclosure you will see one of the unexplained mysteries of the universe. Is he man or is he beast? You will see him living in his natural habitat among the most venomous reptiles that the world provides. Why, he fondles those serpents as a mother would fondle her babes. He neither eats nor drinks, but lives entirely on atmosphere. And we're going to feed him one more time. There will be a slight additional charge for this attraction, but it's not $1, it's not a quarter, it's a cold, thin dime. 10 pennies, 2 nickels, the 10th part of $1. Hurry, hurry, hurry." Stan shifted over to the rear of the canvas pen. The geek scrabbled under a burlap bag and found something. There was a wheat of a cork being drawn, and a couple of rattling swallows and a gasp. The Marcs surged in, young fellows in straw hats with their coats over their arms. Here and there, a fat woman with beady eyes. Why does that kind always have beady eyes? Stan wondered. The gaunt woman with the anemic little girl who had been promised she would see everything in the show. The drunk. No, excuse me. The drunk, period. That's the sentence. It was like a kaleidoscope, the design always changing, the particles always the same. Clem Hotley, owner of the 10-in-1 show and its lecturer, made his way through the crowd. He fished a flask of water from his pocket, took a swig to rinse his throat, and spat it on the ground. Then he mounted a step. His voice was suddenly low and conversational, and it seemed to sober the audience. Folks, I must ask you to remember that this exhibit is being presented solely in the interests of science and education. This creature, which you see before you, a woman looked down for the first time, spied the little king snake, still frantically trying to climb out of the pit. She drew in her breath shrilly between her teeth. This creature has been examined by the foremost scientists of Europe and America, and pronounced a man. That is to say, he has 2 arms, 2 legs, a head and a body, like a man, but under that head of hair there's a brain of a beast. See how he feels more at home with the reptiles of the jungle than with humankind. The geek had picked up a black snake, holding it close behind the head so it couldn't snap at him, and was rocking it in his arms like a baby, muttering sounds. The talker waited while the crowd rubbered. You may well ask how he associates with poisonous serpents without harm. Why, my friends, their poison has no effect whatsoever upon him. But if he were to sink his teeth in my hand, nothing on God's green earth could save me. The geek gave a growl, blinking stupidly up into the light from the bare bulb. Stan noticed that in one corner of his mouth there was a glint from a gold tooth. But now, ladies and gentlemen, when I told you that this creature was more beast than man, I was not asking you to take my word for it. Stan, he turned to the young man, whose brilliant blue eyes had not a trace of revelation in them. Stan, we're going to feed him one more time, for this audience alone. Hand me the basket. Stanton Carlyle reached down, gripped a small, covered market basket by the handle, and boosted it over the heads of the crowd. They fell back, jamming and pushing. Clem Hotley, the talker, laughed with a touch of weariness. It's all right, folks. Nothing you haven't seen before. No, I reckon you all know what this is. From the basket, he drew a half-grown leghorn pullet, complaining. Then he held it up so they could see it. With one hand, he motioned for silence. The necks craned down. The geek had leaned forward on all fours, his mouth hanging open vacantly. Suddenly the talker drew the pullet into the pit with a whirl of feathers. The geek moved toward it, shaking his black cotton mop of a wig. He grabbed for the chicken, but it spread its stumpy wings in a frenzy of self-preservation and dodged. He crawled after it. For the first time, the paint-smeared face of the geek showed some life. His bloodshot eyes were nearly closed. Stan saw his lips shape the words, but without sound. The words were, "You son of a bitch." Gently, the youth eased himself out of the crowd, which was straining, looking down. He walked stiffly around to the entrance, his hands in his pockets. From the pit came a panicky clucking and a cackling, and the crowd drew its breath. The drunk beat his grimy straw hat on the rail. "Get that old chicken, boy! Go get that old chicken!" Then a woman screamed and began to leap up and down jerkily. The crowd moaned in an old language, pressing their bodies tighter against the board walls of the pit and stretching. The cackling had been cut off short, and there was a click of teeth and a grunt of someone working hard. Stan shoved his hands deeper in his pockets. He moved through the flap entrance back into the main ring of the 10-in-1 show, crossed it to the gate, and stood looking out on the carnival midway. When his hands came from his pockets, one of them held a shiny $50. He reached for it with the other hand, and it vanished. Then, with a secret inner smile of contempt and triumph, he felt along the edge of his white flannel trousers and produced the coin. Against the summer night, the Ferris wheel lights winked with the gaiety of rhinestones. The calliope's blast sounded as if the very steam pipes were tired. "Christ almighty, it's hot, huh, kid?" Clem Hoatley, the talker, stood beside Stan, wiping the sweat from the band of his Panama with a handkerchief. "Say, Stan, run over and get me a bottle of lemon soda from the juice joint. Here's a dime. Get yourself one, too." When Stan came back with the cold bottles, Hoatley tilted his gratefully. "Jesus, my throat sore as a bull's ass in fly time." Stan drank the pop slowly. "Mr. Hoatley?" "Yeah, what?" "How do you ever get a guy to geek? Or is this the only one? I mean, is a guy born that way, liking to bite the heads off chickens?" Clem slowly closed one eye. "Let me tell you something, kid. In the carny, you don't ask nothing, and you'll get told no lies." "Okay. But did you just happen to find this fellow doing this somewhere behind a barn and work up the act?" Clem pushed back his hat. "I like you, kid. I like you a lot. And just for that, I'm going to give you a treat. I'm not going to give you a boot in the ass, get it? That's the treat." Stan grinned, his cool, bright blue eyes never leaving the older man's face. Hoatley dropped his voice. "Just because I'm your pal, I ain't going to crap you up. You want to know where geeks come from? Well, listen, you don't find 'em, you make 'em." He let this sink in, but Stanton Carlyle never moved a muscle. "Okay, but how?" Hoatley grabbed the youth by the shirt and drew him nearer. "Listen, kid, do I have to draw you a damn blueprint? You pick up a guy, and he ain't a geek, he's a drunk. A bottle a day booze fool. So you tell him like this: I got a little job for you. It's a temporary job. We got to get a new geek. So until we do, you'll put on the geek outfit and fake it. You tell him, you don't have to do nothing. You'll have a razor blade in your hand, and when you pick up the chicken, you give it a nick with the blade, and then make like you're drinking the blood. Same with rats. The Marcs don't know no different." Hoatley ran his eye up and down the midway, sizing up the crowd. He turned back to Stan. "Well, he does this for a week, and you see to it that he gets his bottle regular, and a place to sleep it off in. He likes this fine. This is what he thinks is heaven. So after a week, you say to him like this, you say, 'Well, I gotta get me a real geek, you're through.' He scares up at this because nothing scares a real rummy like the chance of a dry spell and getting the horrors. He says, 'What's the matter? Ain't I doing okay?' So you say, 'Like crap you're doing okay. You can't draw no crowd faking a geek. Turn in your outfit. You're through.' Then you walk away. He comes following you, begging for another chance, and you go, 'Okay, but after tonight, out you go.' But you give him his bottle. That night, you drag out the lecture and lay it on thick. All the while you're talking, he's thinking about sobering up and getting the crawling shakes. You give him time to think it over while you're talking. Then throw in the chicken. He'll geek." The crowd was coming out of the geek show, gray and listless and silent, except for the drunk. Stan watched them with a strange, sweet, faraway smile on his face. It was the smile of a prisoner who has found a file in a pie. Hope this worked. I've never tried this software before. I've never tried streaming to multiple platforms at the same time. This was my big experiment. Whew! I'm going to turn this off and hopefully not be disappointed when I check my feed. Thank you for being here and enjoying, if you did enjoy, and you were indeed here. To the dickens with you, if you weren't.